Cain Latore, who used to be enslaved but became a guard for the empire, struggled desperately as he protected the unstable emperor. Yes, the very same ruler who had struck a bargain with the demonic being. Right up until his final moments, Cain refused to give up or run away. When everything began reaching its conclusion, Cain found himself wondering about his future reputation. He questioned whether history would remember him as the devoted warrior who remained faithful until the very end, or whether people would simply assume he was too foolish to understand the truth about what was actually going on around him. Neither possibility seemed appealing or worth choosing. Listine, the leader commanding the entire rebellion force, appeared directly before him. He seemed completely exhausted and furious, glaring intensely at Cain while questioning why Cain had changed the direction of his blade strike at such a critical moment. Cain decided it would be simpler if his name completely disappeared from history. Having lived 29 years without any relatives or family connections, he viewed this decision as one he was making for himself. He advised the young heir from the Duke's household not to waste time engaging in a pointless debate. Hallo continued shouting emotionally, frustrated and questioning why Cain hadn't escaped, wondering about his choice to remain and see everything through to the bitter end. Hallo held Cain tightly during his rapid decline, desperately hoping he would somehow revive and stand back up again. Following his death, Cain discovered himself in this surreal location that resembled an infinite ocean with constellations floating overhead. He began questioning whether this strange experience was truly what the afterlife felt like. He understood that possessing complete freedom wasn't nearly as satisfying as he'd imagined it would be. His thoughts drifted to Hallo, and he recalled how Hallo had genuinely shed tears for him previously. He continued reassuring himself that his companion could manage everything alone. Without any warning, an intense wave of power crashed into him violently. Suddenly, he realized he was inside the body of a newly born infant. He detected a man's voice, addressing him as Karen and greeting him into existence. Cain remained completely motionless, utterly shocked, as an elderly gentleman appeared. An older man bearing some resemblance to Hallo embraced him and praised him for staying strong without crying. The man simply wished for his youngest grandchild to remain safe and develop into a healthy person. The overwhelming shock affected baby Karen intensely, and the infant immediately began wailing loudly. He finally realized the truth. He wasn't just another random person anymore. He'd genuinely been reincarnated as Hallo's own descendant. 45 years have passed since those events occurred, and currently Karen Listine, the only child of Count Bali, merely 10 years of age, sat listening to yet another history class. The instructor began discussing how modern society views the warrior, Cain Latore, the soldier who perished alongside the corrupt emperor. Despite Cain's inability to prevent his leader from choosing an evil path, everyone continues remembering him for his unwavering dedication regardless of circumstances. That particular type of devotion still earns admiration, even in present times. When the instructor asked Karen to share his opinion on the matter, Karen approached the instructor and expressed interest in hearing his perspective first. The instructor explained the common belief, mentioning that Grand Duke Hallo sought to restore his companion's reputation, considering everyone recognized their famous bond of friendship. Karen completely surprised his instructor by offering an entirely different interpretation. He suggested that his grandfather, Hallo, genuinely resented his former friend, even following the man's death. That's the reason Hallo constantly praised Cain and portrayed him as far more heroic than he actually was. The instructor hadn't anticipated that response from Karen and requested clarification about his meaning. Karen explained his reasoning, believing that his grandfather simply couldn't forgive what Cain had done. Cain had chosen death rather than joining his grandfather's entire revolutionary movement, and that decision left Cain's personal desire, simply wanting to disappear peacefully without any heroic recognition, completely disregarded and unfulfilled. The instructor seemed doubtful initially, but then recalled certain old stories. Supposedly, when Hallo and Cain confronted each other, their battle concluded much more quickly than anyone anticipated, despite them being considered equally skilled warriors. The instructor began considering the possibility. If Cain truly chose dying rather than fighting against his actual friend, then Karen definitely made a valid argument. The reality that a young person, only 10 years old, could understand something that profound genuinely amazed him. The instructor became extremely anxious, worrying that if he actually endorsed this controversial theory, the Duke's soldiers might literally arrive and execute him for showing disrespect toward the Duke. He began speaking awkwardly, acknowledging he'd never considered that interpretation before. Unexpectedly, Karen suddenly burst out laughing uncontrollably. Karen informed everyone he was simply joking around, somewhat interested in understanding why his instructor appeared so disturbed. Following that moment, Karen refocused his attention on the present situation. He remembered that he was currently Karen Listine, the youngest grandchild in the powerful Duke Listine household. He required some time to absorb everything, but it eventually made sense. He'd truly been reincarnated as Hallo Listine's grandson. He felt angry, considering how that person genuinely had the audacity to transform him into a legendary figure when he obviously didn't desire that. He believed it should have been completely clear, requiring no explanation. Subsequently, Karen noticed his father, Bali, who happens to be Hollow's youngest child, spending a peaceful moment in prayer. After the lesson finished, Karen approached him. He questioned whether his father felt nervous regarding the upcoming awakening ceremony. Bali apologized to his son. When Karen asked what was wrong, his father confessed he was concerned he might have inherited his own difficulties. He never awakened any magical abilities himself, unlike his siblings, and that sort of failure haunted him. Karen reassured his father he supported him completely, emphasizing that, regardless of other people's opinions, he remained the greatest father to him. Bali felt deeply moved by what his son expressed. He embraced him firmly, crying openly, and informed him that, truthfully, he was the finest son anyone could hope for. Bali glanced over and inquired what he wanted for their evening meal. Karen answered immediately. He definitely wanted meat, which wasn't surprising at all. Karen relaxed in his bedroom while lying there, consumed by thoughts about the awakening ceremony. Without warning, memories from his previous life as Cain began flooding back to him. He remembered when he conversed with a younger Hallow. During that time, the entire awakening ceremony concept seemed rather strange to him. He'd never encountered it before. Hallow explained it was an ancient family custom, their method of activating dormant magical powers. Cain simply dismissed it, not valuing abilities you simply receive at birth, like certain people just have advantages naturally. Hallow clarified most individuals never awaken their abilities, and even if someone succeeds, it doesn't automatically mean they'll eventually inherit leadership of the household. Hallow attempted to capture Cain's interest, so he mentioned this incredible family mystery that only the household leader discovers. Cain questioned whether this mystery involved some sort of legendary treasure or perhaps a magical tome that could genuinely make wishes come true. As it turned out, Hallow simply confirmed, verifying it was accurate. Cain mentioned he was somewhat curious, but honestly, what he truly desired was simply to relax somewhere peaceful, far away from everybody. After Hallow laughed at his dream, he just sat there, kind of thrown off. Cain acted like he was mad at his friend's joke, so Hallow got all serious and promised that if he ever became the family head, he'd make an exception just for Cain and tell him the secret. Karen snapped back to reality while sitting in his room, his mind stuck on the whole magic power awakening thing. He thought his dad didn't need to stress about anything. Blue energy and sparks started to wrap around him as he finally let everyone know he'd actually unlocked his magic powers way back. Later on, Karen hung out with his parents, just staring at this super high-tech train. He couldn't help but be amazed. It was the first time he'd ever seen something like that up close. His mom told him, with this proud look, that a lot of the tech on this train actually got out there because his dad, Bali, backed it with his own money. He wanted to play it cool and not make a big deal about what he did, but his mom wasn't having it. She kept hyping him up, saying it was actually awesome. Karen nodded, totally serious, saying he was actually really proud of his dad. Karen sat on the train, his mind still on his dad. Even though his father never got any magic powers, the guy was still a legend, handling almost a third of the Listaine Duchy's money stuff all by himself. Karen couldn't help but respect him for that. He grew up with a mom who was always super caring and a dad who was all about his family. Karen looked at them and just knew they really had the whole parenting thing down. The train kept moving down the tracks. Karen glanced out the window and saw this huge castle standing way out there. That was where the Liston family actually lived. Shanghai Castle stood tall in the distance. Karen couldn't stop thinking about his grandpa, Hollow Liston, being stuck in that place. He was low-key hyped to see what would happen, but there was this anger building up too, just thinking about it. He could feel his anger building up inside, ready to snap. He couldn't believe Hollow went ahead and made him some huge legend, like a name everyone would remember, even though he never wanted any of that. Right then, Karen let out a bit of magic, and his dad snapped awake. Right then, Karen decided he was going to mess with his grandfather non-stop. He wanted to go down as the wildest troublemaker the Liston family ever had. In his head, Karen made a silent promise to his grandpa. He was told to chill and see what his youngest grandson, who was already on the way, was about to do next. As soon as the train pulled up to the station, a crew was already waiting to welcome them. Karen's dad ran into a guy named Heinrich and said, "Hey." Heinrich was quick to thank him, always grateful for how generous the Duke's family had been. Karen noticed the Seawolf Nights happening at the station, and it instantly got her interested. He could tell right away these guys weren't like the nights he was used to back home. He thought about whether they'd noticed the mana he'd already unlocked, but honestly, he wasn't too worried about that. He figured his grandfather would find out sooner or later anyway. The family got led straight into the main part of the castle. He ended up in a big reception room, and Karen just had to chill there while Count Boley went off to say hi to the older folks in the family. Karen sat in the huge room, bored out of her mind, just waiting for something to actually happen. He kind of regretted not just asking to hit up the library instead. Out of nowhere, another guy in the room cut him off and started making fun of him. He joked that the rumors were spot on, that Karen really was a bookworm, since the first thing he wanted when he showed up was to find the library. The boy threw shade at Karen and his dad, saying since he came from Uncle Bali's side of the family, he probably wouldn't ever awaken mana. He said Karen should just focus on studying and making money like everyone else. Basically, just end up like his dad. Karen got mad when she heard the insult, but she stayed chill and asked the boy if he was down to throw hands. The boy didn't expect her to react like that, but he pulled himself together, gathered a bit of mana, and figured he'd let Karen have the advantage. Karen just started thinking if someone in the main house was causing problems. Then, without saying a word, he let out his own mana, and the boy just froze, totally caught off guard. The boy couldn't believe it. He wanted to know when Karen had unlocked her mana and how she pulled it off. Karen just smiled like it was no big deal and let him know that even her dad was clueless about the whole thing. Karen turned to his cousin, he always called him brother, and let him know something was up. Karen basically said the family only needed one person causing chaos, and he was going to be that guy. He told the other to step aside, and his cousin just stood there, totally frozen, not sure what to do. Karen suddenly gave off this intense vibe that made everyone around him uneasy. He turned to his cousin Leo and casually threw out the idea of squaring up for a quick fight. Somewhere else in the castle, the oldest uncle, Tiles Liston, was hanging out with his two brothers. Heinrich had just heard that Karen already unlocked his mana, and the third knight commander backed it up. Raphael Liston, the second uncle, pointed out how Karen never told the main family about his mana awakening. He started throwing shade at their brother Bali, too, calling him a failure and wondering what he was really up to. Bali looked honestly caught off guard. He had no clue what was up either. Tiles turned to his brother Raphael, calling him out for rushing things. He reminded Raphael that it actually made sense Bali didn't know about it since Tiles himself couldn't use mana yet. He looked at everything going on and just thought the whole thing was honestly kind of sad. Out of nowhere, a servant rushed in looking totally stressed and told the head butler he needed to come right away. He called out to find the young master, Raphael. Hallo Listine quietly admitted to himself that things got messed up because people didn't get what was really going on. Raphael figured out the whole thing was about his son, and he shot up from his seat, not happy at all. Over in the reception room, Leo was just sprawled out on the floor, totally wiped out. Raphael showed up, took one look at what was going down, and instantly lost it. He stormed over to Karen, grabbing her, not holding back his frustration. Everyone started talking about him like he was some rude kid who didn't know how to act. He wondered what was on his mind. Just then, Bali and Tiles pulled up. Karen just answered super chill, saying it was all because Leo dissed his dad. Karen thought about it for a second in front of his uncle, wondering if he would have just stayed quiet if he was in his uncle's shoes. Raphael thought Karen was just talking nonsense and not making any sense at all. He grabbed Karen, spun around to face Bali, and let him know straight up to be quiet, basically blaming him for everything, saying it was all on him for not raising his son right. Right then, the head butler stepped in and told everyone to chill. The news dropped that Hello, the boss of the house, was going to handle things himself. Raphael got told to let Karen go, and even though he really didn't want to, he did it anyway. Bali hurried over to see if his son was all right, and Karen let him know everything was cool. After that, the head butler told everyone to head over and meet the master of the house. They made their way down the hallway, just taking it step by step. Karen realized it'd been ages since he last ran into Hello. When they walked into the study, Hello was already at his desk, eyes locked on them. He wasted no time and went straight at Karen, wanting to know why he'd stirred up so much trouble right after showing up. Bali stepped in, ready to back up his son, but Hello shut him down quick, making it clear he wasn't talking to him. He said he wanted to get the answer straight from his son. Hello told Karen he trusted that his son wouldn't just mess around without thinking things through, so he asked him to break down exactly what happened. Karen didn't expect Hello to actually hear him out before dropping any punishment. To him, it felt weirdly chivalrous, like Hello was playing by some knight code or something, and honestly, it threw him off. Karen said it again, making sure everyone heard that Leo had disrespected his dad. Raphael lost his cool again, calling Karen out for lying and pressing him to be honest. Right then, Hello banged his fist on the desk and snapped at Raphael, basically shutting him down and wondering how he had the nerve to yell in front of him. Raphael said sorry to his dad. That was it. Someone made the call to bring Leo in and get the truth straight from him, telling Heinrich to grab Leo right after his treatment wrapped up. Before anything else, Hello looked over at Karen. He let her know he still had more on his mind than just the insult. Karen already knew what his grandfather was about to ask, so he went ahead and said he'd awakened his mana 3 years back. Everyone there was caught off guard by that. Halo thought about why he'd kept it secret from his own dad for so long, kind of curious about this kid who managed to unlock mana by himself when he was still so young. Karen said he didn't even know it was mana at first. He only figured it out after reading about it in a book later on. His grandpa kept pushing, wanting the full story about what went down next. Karen just played it off like he was all innocent, saying he just wanted to keep things on the down low. He thought having a secret made everything more fun, especially since the knights around his area had no clue what was going on. Hello checked checked in to see if that was everything, and Karen gave him a big, upbeat nod. Leo pulled up right then, all patched up from his injuries. Halo didn't waste any time and straight up wanted to know if Leo had really disrespected his uncle. Karen went all out, acting like he was super upset about Leo trash-talking his dad. He started talking about Leo's father like he was just some rude guy obsessed with cash. Then Karen switched gears and started roasting his own dad, calling him useless and full of himself, kind of wondering how messed up he'd feel if his dad died without ever realizing the truth. He wrapped up his speech by owning up to his mistake. Even after everything, he knew he shouldn't have gone after Leo like that, and he realized he'd messed up big time. Leo couldn't believe what he was hearing and immediately said he never said anything like that. Right then, Karen let some of his power loose, trying to scare Leo into backing down. Hello just kept it cool and asked Leo if Karen was telling the truth. Leo, kinda nervous, owned up to it right away. Right after he heard the confession, everything just kinda paused for him. Hello figured the awakening ceremony was happening tomorrow, so he told both guys they'd deal with the consequences later and just sent them off to get some sleep. That night, Halo was chilling and decided to see what Heinrich thought about Bali's son. Heinrich played it cool, saying the kid had a lot going on that the boss might want to check out. Halo was on the same page, thinking Karen was pretty interesting. He managed to unlock mana by himself and kept it under wraps for 3 years. On top of that, he threw some shade at how skilled the knights were in his dad's territory. Halo started thinking maybe he hadn't really been there for his son Bali like he should have. Heinrich figured Halo was just reading too much into things, but Halo kept saying this grandson wasn't like the others. Everyone knew Halo was about to find out what Karen was really like. He started wondering if he actually had something unique going on for the ceremony tomorrow. He couldn't stop wondering if he'd actually make it through the ceremony without anything wild happening. He started thinking about what he might get out of it later that night. Everyone in the family showed up outside, getting ready for the ceremony. Karen spotted the Liston elders in their robes, and even though they'd already retired, she could still sense how powerful they were. He noticed everyone was there, Tiles and his daughter Leon, plus Raphael and his son Leo. Karen started to see that this ceremony actually mattered way more than he first believed. Right in the middle of everyone, there was this stone platform holding a huge black rock. Karen saw it and knew right away it was the Oath Stone. Hello kicked things off, letting everyone know the eye-opening ritual was about to start. He said that once Karin stepped through the rift made by the Oath Stone, the stone would drop him into a world only it could reveal. He broke it down, saying that everyone's world is different, and the whole thing wraps up once Karen breaks through that world with the clear insight weapon he's supposed to get there. Once Karen gave him the go-ahead, he was all set. Hello grabbed his necklace and used it to trigger the Oath Stone. Out of nowhere, a blast of blue energy shot straight up. He tore open this bright, glowing crack right in the middle of the air. Bali rested his hand on his son's shoulder, kind of tense. He wanted to know if his son was nervous and if he could actually handle what was about to happen. Karen gave his dad a nod, letting him know he was good and would be back soon. Karen looked at what he had to do. Basically wreck the world with some weapon he'd get. Honestly, he didn't stress about it at all. Breaking stuff was kind of his thing, and he figured this job would be a breeze. Watching from afar, Hello really hoped his grandson could just push past his fear. The moment Karen walked through the rift, everything changed. He realized he was back in that same place he never wanted to see again. He saw the Imperial Palace on fire, packed with the bodies of his fallen friends. He got annoyed, trying to figure out why the stone kept bringing up all these rough memories. He started wondering if they just wanted him to feel bad about his friends who didn't make it back, even though none of it was really his fault. Karen suddenly picked up on a strange voice talking about his world, saying it was empty and kind of sad. The voice called him the child of the Blue Wolf, and said it was finally time for the covenant he had to follow through on the promise his ancestor made. Karen wondered if the voice she was hearing belonged to a demon, but the voice pushed back, saying there's no way any demon would mess with his blood. Karen heard a voice telling him to push past his nerves and step up to the throne. It made him think that everything he wanted was right there if he just went for it. Karen finally made it to the throne. The same throne the Emperor was so desperate to keep safe, he actually made a deal with a demon for it. He climbed the stairs, each step making him remember everyone who was gone. He never thought things would end like this, and it felt like every move was a reminder of what had happened. He spotted his old weapon just lying there. The voice recognized him right away, saying he was the Blue Wolf Clan's guy now. He handed it over and let him know this was what he'd be using to fight. Karin spotted his favorite sword right away, the one the Emperor gave him. It was Ruin, that messed up blade with a reputation. The voice wanted him to fill it up with mana, but Karin wasn't having it. She straight up warned that the sword eats away at its wielder's soul. He found out the creepy vibe from the sword wasn't the demon itself. It was just some leftover curse, all twisted up, because his grandfather already wiped out the real evil ages ago. He realized he was the only one who could bring it to life. Karen paused, eyeing the sword and thinking if it was even a good idea to grab it. The thought of going back to how he used to be, just following the Emperor and doing whatever he was told, no matter how many people got hurt, had him stressing. Right then Hollow's voice popped into his head, pushing him to get past that fear. Karen finally got what was really up with Hello always being so nice. The whole point of the eye-opening ritual wasn't just about getting a weapon. It was about the heir unlocking some next-level mana so he could finally face down whatever scared him the most. With everything clicking into place, Karen reached out and grabbed his sword like he knew exactly what he was doing. The moment Karen grabbed the sword, a wave of intense blue energy rushed into him. He knew right away it was that clear insight mana. In his hand, the sword started shifting, its shape slowly changing right in front of him. He heard a weird voice say it had no clue why the sword showed up looking like it used to. Ruin. Turns out the sword wasn't just any weapon. It used to be his ancestor Rael's. The voice explained that this sword didn't show up in any history books, unlike the other sword Graham that Hallow grabbed, because its power was on a whole different level compared to what the family usually had. Karen's whole body lit up with pain when the hidden mana in the sword started burning into him. Even though it was brutal, the voice in his head kept telling him to tough it out. Karen could tell the mana moving through his body was getting way more intense. He wanted to know what the sword was really called, so he went ahead and asked the voice about its real name. Turns out, the voice said this sword was the execution sword guillotine, the same blade that took out tons of demons and basically absorbed their power. The demons were so scared of it that they just straight up erased it from their minds. Karen thought about what to call his weapon now. The voice pointed out how the sword, looking just like the dark depths of the ocean, was basically made for Karen's fate. Karen started wondering who the voice belonged to. He thought maybe it was the blue dragon that watched over their place, but the voice let him know he wasn't strong enough yet to even handle hearing its real name. He said that one day, when the guy gets strong enough to run things in the ocean, he should come check it out up in the North Sea. After all that happened, Karen wanted to know how to get out of this world, but the voice made it clear deep down he already had the answer. Karen finally got what he needed to do, break the whole world apart, just like they told him when this whole ritual started. He was hyped about it too, honestly admitting to himself that he'd always wanted to go for something this wild. He gripped his sword tight and swung hard, breaking the fake world around him into pieces. Back in real life, Halo tried to calm Bali down, since he was clearly on edge. Watching his son go down a road he never could really stings for a dad. He knew this was the kind of stuff that really tested if someone was serious or not. Out of nowhere, the oath stone started cracking like it was about to explode, and Leo instantly called out to his grandpa, letting him know something was seriously wrong with the stone. Everyone just froze for a second, and then the stone totally broke apart. Out of nowhere, Karen popped up right where the busted stone used to be, gripping his new sword. He glanced around, grinning, and wanted to know what was up with the oath stone. He noticed it was busted. Bali stormed up to him, clearly mad, wanting answers about what he'd just done. Karen lifted the sword up with some energy, letting everyone know it was the execution sword guillotine that used to belong to their ancestor, Rael Listine. Hearing this, Hello and the elders were frozen for a second. That blade was supposed to be wiped from the family records. No mention of it anywhere. Only the patriarch and the elders even knew it ever existed, and that was just from stories handed down. Everyone started questioning why this thing showed up right now. Meanwhile, Hello was stuck thinking if the time for the covenant was finally coming up. Hello looked at his grandson and wanted to know if this sword freaked him out at all. Karen didn't even hesitate. He was totally sure of himself and just shook his head. After Hello took a second to figure out what was going on, he started thinking back to ancient times. Way back, his ancestors teamed up with the blue dragons to wipe out the demons. They dropped the oath stone there as proof they made the deal. He waited for the day someone in his family would finally keep the promise. Staring at his grandson Karen, he couldn't help but wonder if Karen was actually the one meant to make it happen. Halo lifted his hand and made it official. Karen, Bali Listane's son, just got recognized as the real deal in Cheonghae Castle. With the execution sword guillotine backing him, Karen now counted as a legit member and stood in line to take on all the big initiation stuff. Raphael got pretty fired up when he heard that. He wasn't about to let some brat get those rights without a fight. Bali hurried over to see if his son was all right, but Karen let him know everything was fine. Tiles, the oldest uncle, sat there thinking hard. He had to be real with himself. This legendary sword was news to him. He'd never even heard of it before. Just being near it gave off a vibe that sent chills down his spine. Tiles was thinking about his brother Bali, pretty much telling him in his head that he wasn't about to let anything mess up who would take over next, not even his own son. He knew Karen was doing something nobody else had tried before, but that didn't change how locked in he was on keeping things the way they should be. Once that was done, Hello wrapped things up and told everyone it was time to head back. As they headed out, Raphael stopped and got in Tiles' face, clearly mad, wanting to know if his older brother was really just going to stand there and do nothing. Tiles just let him know they'd chill and have a talk soon. Raphael figured Tiles, who was usually all about himself, probably sensed things were getting risky too. Raphael couldn't figure it out and was getting annoyed, thinking about why they picked Bali's son out of everyone. Tiles told him straight up that starting fights with each other was the last thing they needed right now. When his parents were getting ready to head out, Bali looked at his son, clearly worried, and checked if he'd be okay staying by himself. Heinrich let him know Chonghae Castle had his back. It was pretty much the safest spot around. Bali was cool with the castle holding up against anything outside, but he couldn't shake the thought that trouble might actually start from inside. He knew his brothers would never try anything wild when their dad was around. Heinrich walked up and let everyone know that Lady Sabina was the one in charge of Karen's initiation. Karen and his dad finally relaxed. Sabina Lestine was Hallett's little sister, and everyone knew she could hold her own just like her brothers. People even called her the White Wolf. Bali told his son to treat her with respect, and Karen said he got it. Right before heading out, Heinrich passed along one last update from Halo. Bali's family was getting their own spot in the castle, so they'd always have a place to crash whenever they wanted to come by. Bali took in what his dad did, and it really got to him. He shot Heinrich a grateful look, kind of relieved, like he could finally step out with nothing left hanging over him. He said goodbye to his son, telling him to look after himself and hit him up if he ever needed anything. Once the train pulled away, Heinrich walked with Karen down the castle halls, telling her that Lady Sabina wanted to see him. Right before they got there, Heinrich paused and dropped a quick tit for Karen. She wanted him to stop calling Lady Sabina grandmother, since she seriously couldn't stand that title. Karen nodded and thanked him for the advice, but in his head he couldn't help thinking how weird the whole thing was. They pulled up to the Spirit Training Hall deep in Cheonghae Forest, a spot that's just for the main family. No outsiders ever get in. Heinrich let Karen know that Lady Sabina was already inside waiting for him, and Lord Leo was hanging out there too. His dad, Raphael, had specifically asked for this. Karen heard the news and lit up, heading straight inside. Heinrich could already tell things were about to get loud again. Karen could already sense a crazy strong mana vibe coming from the hall before he even stepped inside. He pushed open the door, letting everyone know he was there. The White Wolf caught his eye right away. Before he could really get settled, someone inside snapped at him to hurry up and come in. Karen definitely didn't expect Lady Sabina to look so young. When he showed up, she greeted him and could tell right away that he hadn't pictured her like this. Time really flew by. Sabina noticed that Bali's kid was already grown up. Karen figured out right away that the reason she never aged was because she rebuilt her body using mana, something only people at the 8-star master rank could actually pull off. Sabina told Karen to sit down next to Leo, legs crossed. Karen nodded and leaned in, telling his cousin, who was clearly on edge, that they'd be hanging out a lot more from now on. He let him know he was actually pretty hyped about it. Sabina noticed that he actually knew what her title was. Karen told her he'd seen stuff like that in history books, since he was actually into reading them. Sabina grinned, thinking her brother Hello had it right. This guy really was something else. When Karen wanted to know what his grandpa had said, Sabina got ready to fill her in. She passed along what he said, letting them know he's the kind of guy everyone vibes with, and after meeting him herself, she totally got why people said that. Sabina thought back to her chat with Hello, remembering how he compared Karen to a kid who had to cross this huge ocean. He wanted her to be the one who kept him steady, showing him the way so he could own that whole ocean. Sabina looked at Karen and could just tell he had something big in him, like there was no limit to what he could do. He wasn't perfect yet, but there was a real chance he could end up leading everyone his age someday. She thought hanging out with this cool guy was actually pretty funny. Sabina kicked things off, letting everyone know that sitting cross-legged was basically step one for learning mana. She said once they got past the beginner stuff, they wouldn't even need to sit down to make it work, right as she's about to do it too. She let out this blast of pure sea mana, and all the guys just stood there totally blown away. Sabina broke down how the Sea Overlord method works. Basically, it's all about building up a whole ocean of mana inside your body and learning how to control it. She broke it down for him. The more oceans someone can handle, the stronger they get. If you've got 8 oceans under your control, you're at the 8-star level. But if you can take those 8 and run them like they're one huge sea, that's when you hit 9 stars, next level stuff. She mentioned that just 3 people across the whole continent had ever made it this far, and inside the Empire only 1. Right away, Karen put it together. His grandpa was the one. That was wild. Sabina let everyone know her brother, Halu Lestine, was the only one on the whole continent who made it to 9-star expert. Hearing that, Karen got fired up. He promised himself that this time around, he was going to catch up to his grandpa, no matter what. Sabina could tell the kid was hungry for power. He thought the guy was actually pretty funny and figured he was worth teaching. Sabina kicked off the mana training, telling the guys to push their mana into those new channels they got during the awakening ceremony. She let them know that mana isn't something you force, it's more about letting it flow and going with it. Sabina kept an eye on their mana waves while Karen checked his own stats and saw his were still kind of rough around the edges. She told him to kick things off by focusing on the heart. Sabina watched Karen and couldn't believe how strong she was already. It made no sense that someone who just wrapped up the awakening ceremony could pull that off. She thought about how he stacked up against Leo. Leo had gotten the Sea Overlord method 2 years back, but he was still nowhere close to hitting 2 stars. Meanwhile, Karen was just doing his own thing, figuring out his mana paths without anyone teaching him. It was like his instincts just kicked in, and he started making progress on his own. Karen was hit with heavy pressure, like his body was about to split in two. He just quit training by himself. Sabina first figured Leo was just wiped out, but then it clicked. He'd actually been holding back and pacing himself like a pro. Right then, Leo suddenly dropped, totally drained from pushing his mana way too hard. Sabina hurried over to him, not happy at all that he pushed his mana so hard. Sabina realized she'd totally lost focus because she kept watching Karen. Karen figured adults were basically there to keep kids from doing dumb stuff and getting hurt. When she glanced at Leo, she just shook her head, thinking he was embarrassing himself. Sabina thought about Leo and realized he was nothing like Karen. Karen knew exactly when to stop and never pushed herself too far, so she never ended up getting hurt. Leo, on the other hand, just didn't have that same sense. He would keep going even when it wasn't the smartest move. She noticed how he kept it together even though deep down he really wanted that power. He started to think about whether this kid actually needed someone to help him find his way. Sabina turned to Karen and let him know she'd keep him safe for the next 3 years. He told him to work on getting stronger right now so he'd be able to look out for himself. Karen was all in and actually seemed pumped about it. Later, over at the dueling training ground, Leo walked up to Karen, curious if he was really going to bring out the guillotine sword even just for practice. Karen just answered, not really thinking it was a big deal. He mentioned that his grandfather hooked him up with a special scabbard made just to keep the sword's power under control. The new instructor walked up and let them know he was the one who'd be showing the guys how to handle swords. Xerus Winterguard was the guy in charge of the Seawolf Knights. Karen walked up to Sir Xerus and gave him a respectful nod. In his head, he clocked that Xerus was an 8-star expert, which was pretty next level. Xerus let the guys know he wasn't going to start calling them young master just yet. They had to prove themselves to the Seawolf Knights first if they wanted that kind of respect. Karen said he was cool with it and actually thought it was easier that way. He knew all about how the Liston family always had to prove themselves with skill if they wanted the Blue Wolves to respect them. Xerus didn't expect Karen to react that way. Most nobles probably would have been mad, but she just switched it up. Sir Xerus figured maybe, after all this time, the family finally got an heir who wouldn't mess around and would actually step up. Karen was sure that, no matter what happened, everyone would end up respecting him. Xerus spotted the strange aura and switched up his whole plan right away. He realized the guy who just showed up wasn't some big-shot heir. He was actually way worse than Leo, just a straight-up troublemaker. While all this was going on, Sabina pulled her brother Hello aside to give him a heads up. She wanted him to really think about how Karen could shake up the whole plan for who takes over next, especially since it might mess with whatever future he had lined up for his own son. Halo started thinking his sister might be hinting that his son could actually get pushed aside by his nephew. Sabina made it clear that if people across the Empire found out just how talented Karen was, things could get complicated. Whatever happened next totally depended on who ended up taking his spot. Sabina chatted with her brother, Hello, worrying that their family could fall apart now that the Oathstone was broken. With more and more demons popping up from beyond the North Sea, things were starting to look rough. Hello wasn't buying it at all. He let everyone know about this secret prophecy that only the family head knew. Basically, whoever smashes the stone gets to set up a new one, just like their ancestor did back in the day. Sabina figured out the time for the covenant was coming up soon. She wanted to know when he planned to tell Karen, but Hello just said it'd go down when the time felt right. During winter, Bali sat down and opened up a letter from his son, Karen. Karen sent his dad an update, letting him know he was doing all right. He broke down his training, saying he just unlocked the 4th move in both sword styles he was learning. He also let his dad know he was actually making an effort with the relatives, just like he'd been told to, and he was looking out for Leo too. By the time he wrapped up the letter, he tossed in a playful request for extra cash since he'd already burned through his allowance. That little move had Bali cracking up, feeling pretty fond of him. Bolli remembered talking with Heinrich about the time he left Karen at the castle 3 years back. He couldn't help but think about how stressed he was back then, leaving Karen behind and not knowing if things would turn out all right. Heinrich let him know that Karen was actually fitting in pretty well, and thanks to him, the castle wasn't quiet anymore. Even though Bali tried to tell his son to keep a low profile, Heinrich just shrugged it off, thinking that if you've got something special, people are going to notice no matter what. Heinrich pointed out that things could flip fast, since pretty soon, everyone was going to hear about Karen and there'd be no way to stop it. He realized that being a blue wolf meant he had to handle whatever jobs got thrown his way. What really got to Bali was how his brother was acting now that Karen was starting to take over. Heinrich dropped one more tip for Bali before heading out, letting him know that Lady Sabina seriously liked Karen. Bali let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Hearing that news, he finally relaxed. Bali felt like sending that monthly allowance was finally worth it, seeing everything pay off. Heinrich, on the other hand, was just glad to see Bali joking around and not stressing as much anymore. Bali couldn't help but worry since his aunt was about to dip out of the castle soon. Heinrich let him know again that Karin was tight with the Seawolf Knights now, so much so they even gave him his own nickname, the tiny, wild blue sea pup. Kieran showed up at the training ground and went all in, pushing himself hard. He didn't even break a sweat taking down Hans, a massive knight who everyone thought was tough. Kieran called him out for not being tough enough, letting him know that knowing the Seawolf sword doesn't mean much if he just gets pushed around. No matter how bad things get, even with broken bones, you gotta keep pushing and fight back with everything you've got. Hans gave up, saying Kieran was the only reason he looked tough. Kieran just laughed at his muscles, calling them nothing but balloon muscles. Hans stood there on the training ground, realizing he'd never even heard of balloon muscles before. He realized that now, without mana, he couldn't keep up with Kieran at all. It kind of hit him how much stronger the guy had gotten in just a year. Dude leveled up fast. Hans let Kieran know he'd probably have to head out for a mission pretty soon. Hans let everyone know that Sir Zurus was calling the shots on when the mission would start since Halo was still hanging out in the capital. He guessed they were heading out west to the Celestial Dome area. Lately, more demons had been popping up there, so it made sense. Leo was off to the side, grinding through his training. He couldn't relax since the thought of getting teamed up with Kieran again just didn't sit right with him. He wanted to crush it, but deep down he also hoped his parents would be proud if things worked out. Back in the present, Bali let Heinrich know that he didn't call him over just because of Kieran's letter. Bali handed him a small pouch, letting him know that the gate inspectors in their area had found it stashed in a merchant's cart that came up from the barony of Balos. Bali said it was cocaine, and told him to start digging into the Belos barony, kicking things off at Blue Sea Castle. He stood at the train station, watching people rush by and trains pull in and out. A guy stepped off the train, looking around and trying to figure out if he'd actually made it to Blue Sea Castle. That night, Kieran was out on the castle grounds, moving quietly after sneaking inside and grabbing a bottle from Xeris' stash. He thought messing with Xeris' collection always made things way more interesting. He was just chilling with his drink when someone showed up, looking for Duke Listine with something important. The guard told the visitor that the Duke was out in the capital right now, so Knight Commander Xeris was the one running things for the moment. Kieran jumped into the conversation. The guard spotted him and instantly knew who he was. Turns out, this guy was actually the young Baron, Rohan Belos, just showing up and making it official. Rohan saw Kieran and instantly remembered all the stuff people had said about him. Rohan's aide wanted to bring this straight to the Knight Commander, but Kieran wasn't having it. He made it clear he was the one who'd hear Rohan out. He thought it was just basic respect for someone important on their side to show up when a visitor had come all the way with something urgent. Kieran told the guard to go give Xeris a different message. Rohan saw how sharp Kieran was when it came to politics, and honestly, he was kind of impressed. Rohan noticed a kid holding a liquor bottle, and it definitely threw him off. He told Rohan to come with him. Once they were alone, Kieran broke down what was going on. Rohan had some bandits causing trouble in the eastern mountains of his territory. Rohan backed it up, saying these bandits were out here dealing drugs and grabbing people to sell them off as slaves. Rohan admitted he was bummed about how things were going. His barony barely had any money, and their soldiers weren't strong at all. Even when his dad tried to face the bandits, it totally backfired. He ended up hurt so bad he had to just stay in bed. Kieran slammed the liquor bottle down, totally fired up. To her, just wrecking these guys wasn't even close to enough payback. He noticed something weird. How could just a bunch of bandits actually go toe-to-toe with a real army? That didn't add up. Rohan explained that they thought these bandits could really be soldiers who bailed on the Southern Kingdom's army. That army was still out there fighting a war. Kieran took a good look at what was going on. After the evil emperor stepped down, most of the imperial army got sent south to handle the war, which left the north basically wide open. This let deserters turn into bandits. Rohan thought this explanation made the most sense. Karin handed Rohan a drink and mentioned that the barony of Belos was right next to where his dad lived. For Rohan, this wasn't just some random issue, it actually mattered to him too. He said he wanted to help out himself. Rohan appreciated it, but couldn't help thinking if it was cool to take a drink from a kid. Kieran just casually let it slip that the drink was actually swiped from Sir Zerus' stash and told Rohan to keep it on the down low. As soon as Rohan heard the name of the legendary Knight Commander, he froze. He couldn't believe what he'd just heard. Right then, Xeris walked in and reminded Kieran that he'd said not to mess with his drink. Rohan got caught off guard and accidentally knocked his drink over. Xeris just played it cool and let Rohan know it was all good. Xerus turned to Rohan and let him know he'd caught wind of what was really stressing him out about the bandits. Rohan had shown up because he needed help, and he made it clear that was the whole reason he was there. Xerus was just about to respond when Charon jumped in and cut him off. Xerus shot him a look, called him out for drinking when he shouldn't be, and snatched the drink out of his hand. Xerus said sorry to the young Baron for making things awkward. He let him know that Blue Sea Castle wasn't just going to sit back and watch while one of their own was in trouble. They let him know they were getting ready to send out troops soon. Karin stepped up and said she'd handle the mission, but Zirus shut it down right away. He thought the other side was full of pros and maybe even had some secret heavy hitters. Rohan didn't expect Karin to be this serious about helping out. It honestly caught him off guard. Zirus pushed back, since he knew going up against someone for real just wasn't the same as messing around in practice. Karin said that being way too protective wasn't actually helping anyone. Zirus made it clear he'd rather send him out to tackle a straight-up threat in the west than deal with something unclear and unpredictable. Karin grinned, looking sneaky, and wondered what would happen if he threw out an offer that was just too good to turn down. Later on at the train station, Leo just stood there, not believing he actually had to go on this mission. Meanwhile, Karin was hyped, pulling him in with an arm around his shoulders, clearly loving that this was their first mission together. Zirus watched everything go down and suddenly got it. He'd been played. Karin had pulled a fast one and used Lady Sabina to get what she wanted. Zirus figured maybe it was actually better this way, since they'd have someone solid looking out for them. Zirus caught on that by letting Lord Leo tag along. He was basically saying he was cool with how their training turned out. Baron Rohan showed up to watch them leave too. He was stressing hard about keeping the Duke's grandson safe because if anything happened to them, it'd be all on his family. Zirus tried to calm him down, letting him know he didn't have to stress about it. He made it clear that as long as Sabina was around, the boys were safe. Nothing was going to happen to them. Sabina suddenly cut him off, dropping a wild take. She said she wasn't going to step in unless things got so bad the guys might actually die. Rohan and Leo got spooked by what she said, both of them looking uneasy. Zirus, though, just pointed out that this was typical for her. She always had guts. Sabina dropped a hint that something was holding her back from stepping up to the front lines. Zirus just got it right away and rolled with it. At the train station, Sabina saw Leo shaking. She looked at him and let him know she got why he was nervous, but she wanted him to see this mission as his shot to show everyone how hard he'd been grinding for the last 3 years. If he pulled this off, people would finally see him as a legit member of the Blue Wolves. Karin cut in with his usual sarcasm, basically calling out Leo for always needing a nudge. That set Leo off, and he snapped back, clearly not having it. Karin's words snapped him back to reality, and right then, he knew he had to step up and show what he could really do. The magic train rolled out of Blue Sea Castle, cruising straight toward the barony of Baelos. As the train pulled off, Karin sat there, kinda surprised at how fast everything had gone down. He honestly didn't see this moment coming so soon. While riding the train, Sabina told Baron Rohan the real reason she had to lay low. Nobody was supposed to know she was at Blue Sea Castle. She was basically off the radar. If anyone spotted her, those bandits would just vanish like they were never there. Rohan still wasn't cool with just sending 2 kids out there. He kept an eye on Karin, but she looked totally chill, like nothing could bother her. Leo looked super on edge. Leo started thinking back to when his mom got on his case. She remembered how she'd once asked him how he managed to hang around Karin, even after what happened 3 years back. That moment had really messed with his reputation and made his dad look bad too. He made it clear to him that Karin wasn't on his side. She was the one he had to beat. Leo just sat there, not saying a word, and she fired back by calling him weak. Leo finally got back to his mom and let her know that Karin wasn't his competition. He broke down just how big the skill difference was. Karin hit 4 stars when she was only 13, while he was still at 3 stars by the time he turned 15. Leo made it clear Karin wasn't even in the running against him. He kept grinding because he had a goal that kept him moving forward. His mom wrapped up their talk by pointing out that he's too focused on the rivals right in front of him, not even noticing the bigger game that's going on. Sabina and Leo were riding the train together. Leo told her he was pretty nervous since this was his first real mission. Sabina looked at him and threw out a straight-up question. She wanted to know if Leo could actually take someone out. Leo paused, not sure how to answer. Sabina had his back, telling him straight up he shouldn't second-guess himself. She really got how tough his training was, probably more than anyone else. Leo remembered she was the one who put him through all his training. Her words really got to him, and he ended up calling her master without even thinking. The train was pulling in soon, just 20 minutes to go, so Sabina made a call. For this mission, they'd go by master and student. That was the plan. She let everyone know she was about to jump off the train and check things out before anyone noticed her. Rohan wasn't having it. Jumping off a moving train sounded way too risky to him. Sabina let him know he didn't have to stress about getting in trouble, since her nephews would be keeping an eye on him from afar. Karin couldn't help but be impressed by how bold she was. Meanwhile, Sabina just went for it and leaped off the train. Rohan and Leo just stood there, totally thrown off, trying to figure out what was up with the Liston family and all their weird habits. When they got to the barony of Baelos, Rohan's dad was waiting for them. He was the baron, but you could tell he wasn't in great shape. He had to stay seated. He said sorry for not standing up, but Karin just kept it cool, told him it was all good, and wanted to know how he got hurt. When the boys finally met Baron Balos, who was stuck in bed, the Baron showed some real appreciation for them checking in on him. He also brought up that he'd crossed paths with Karen and his dad about 10 years back. Everyone noticed how much he'd leveled up, and honestly, his dad had to be proud seeing that. Karen didn't really vibe with all the fancy talk, so he asked the Baron to just keep it real with him. The Baron was cool with it and started calling him Young Master Karen. The Baron picked up on what was going on right away. He figured Karen had to be at the 4-star level already since he got his first mission so young. The Baron seemed pretty sure the main house knew what they were doing when it came to judging the boy's skills. At the same time, he couldn't help but worry about sending these two solid guys into such a risky situation. Karen gave the Baron a nod, letting him know he got where he was coming from, but for the Blue Wolves, losing just isn't on the table. Messing up a mission would trash their reputation, and that's something they just don't let happen. He looked over at Leo, wanting to make sure they were good, and Leo, not super confident, still nodded and said they'd pull it off. The Baron just started laughing, clearly amused, and gave them a nod for trusting him. Karen could tell the Baron was wiped out, so she let everyone know it was time to head out. The Baron handed the job over to them and said he'd set up someone to show them the ropes. The boys started hiking behind the guide, snow crunching under their boots. Karen started messing with Leo, acting like he was already out of breath, but Leo just shrugged it off and kept his eye on the guide, not really trusting the guy. Some people started side-eyeing him, saying he could have been working with the bandits for all they knew. Karen hit him with some sarcasm, basically roasting him for finally catching on. Then, staying chill, she let him know Leo was right about the guy dude was probably with the bandits the whole time. Leo just froze, not expecting that at all. He wondered how Karen found out. Turns out, Karen had caught bits of Baron Rohan's conversation while hanging around the station. Back when all this started, Rohan's aide wanted to know how they were supposed to track down where the bandits were hiding out. Rohan just told him straight that they'd have to rely on someone inside the group who'd already turned against them. He wondered why Leo never brought it up before. Karen said he'd been on edge the whole day. Karen looked at what just happened and realized Rohan played it smart. He actually used the traitor on purpose to mess with them. He let Leo know that their job right now was basically to act as bait, since getting snatched as young nobles would score the kidnappers a fat ransom. Karen told Leo that the traitor still being around, totally untouched, basically showed how bad things had gotten for them. It was clear they were running out of options. Sven, the guide, took them straight into a trap that the bandit leader had set up. He got a bonus since the people he took out were actually young nobles. One of the bandits could tell the two guys weren't just going to roll over and do whatever they were told. Karen and Leo got into position, both locked in and ready to throw down. Karen was seriously mad and made it clear he wasn't about to let them off the hook for bringing drugs into his dad's territory. Back at the Baron's place, Rohan checked on his dad to see if he was alright. His dad just nodded, looking totally fine and acting like nothing was wrong. Rohan handed his dad a cup of water. Rohan looked at his dad, kind of worried, and wanted to know if those two guys were going to be okay. The dad just pointed out that Blue Sea Castle must really trust these guys' skills if they sent them off with barely any info. He pointed out that Karen really had the same vibe as Duke Hallow when he was younger, not just how he looked, but also the way he carried himself, all confident and steady. Karen's chill and respectful attitude totally brought those memories back. At the Baron's place, Baron Balos looked at his son and straight up showed he trusted the two boys to handle things. He really thought it made sense to count on them. Up in the snowy mountains, Karen was deep in the action, taking down bandits like it was nothing. She moved fast, almost unreal, dropping enemies left and right. Leo just stood there, frozen, not saying a word. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. He looked at Karen and realized she was on a whole different level, straight up a monster. The deputy leader looked uneasy as he let the boss know these weren't just some regular folks. They needed to back off and tell the main squad what was up. The bandit leader got heated. He wasn't about to let some newbie take him down. He charged straight at Karen, glowing with this wild red energy around him. Karen stayed calm when she saw him, barely reacting and even calling his battle yell kind of annoying. With one swing, he just sliced the guy clean in two. Leo just froze for a second, not really believing what just happened. Meanwhile, Karen just shrugged it off, pointing out that he'd pulled off some crazy strong move without even trying. Karen started going off because the leader got something on his clothes. Aura, one of the last bandits standing, totally froze when he saw Karen's power. The vibe coming off Karen's sword was so intense, Aura almost couldn't handle it. He just gave up right away. Karen grinned, looked right at Orha, and told him to grab a rope and bring it over. Leo couldn't believe it. Karen told Orha to tie both him and Leo up. They handed him their swords too, getting him ready for whatever was about to go down. Leo wanted to know why they were putting in so much effort, and Karen broke it down for him. If they wanted the bandits to buy it and actually find where the gang was hiding, getting caught had to look 100% real. It just didn't make sense that one guy with no weapons could take down two nobles on his own. While they kept moving, Karen started grilling Orha, the guy they'd captured. Orha, totally freaked out, admitted they'd bailed on the kingdom of Caius and dipped out of the southern war zone. Karen wanted to know how many people they had inside the fortress, so she asked him straight up. Orha let him know there were 130 people in total, plus 2 mages and their guard knights. Right then, Orha understood just how badly he'd messed up. Turns out, the people he caught weren't just some random nobles, they were actually the next in line from the powerful Liston family. Karen listened to Orha talk about how their leader promised everyone quick cash, but honestly he just couldn't see how any of that made sense. He couldn't figure out why someone as high up as mages would hang around with just a basic infantry captain, or why they'd even bother showing up in some broke place like the Bellows Barony just to pull off some robberies. Karen decided the story just didn't add up at all. They knew they couldn't just sit back, so they went to check things out for themselves. When they showed up at the bandits' hideout, the guards looked confused, not expecting Orha to roll in with hostages. Orha pulled up to the bandits' hideout alone, gear strapped on, and the guards instantly started grilling him about showing up solo and armed. Orha said he grabbed the weapons from the young masters as his own loot, while his crew was already out there running after the ones who got away. The guards messed with him a bit, but they still opened up the gate. Inside, Karen noticed the deserters just chilling and not really on guard. He noticed this weird energy around him the whole time, and it honestly kept him on edge. His sword, Guillotine, started acting up in response. He quickly figured out what was messing with him. Dead birds were hanging everywhere like some kind of creepy offering. There was a huge black magic circle drawn out on the ground. Karen didn't waste any time. She told Orha to cut him loose and hand over his sword. Leo just stood there, totally caught off guard, as he got told to grab his sword, Sylphid. He was warned he'd need it real soon. Right then, the magic circle lit up and skeletons with weapons started crawling out of the ground. Orha started freaking out. That's when the bandit leader showed up. He acted all smug, almost like he was clowning on the hostages just for showing up at his mountain hideout. Karen scanned the area trying to spot the black mage, but the guy was nowhere to be seen. He figured the mage was probably hiding out somewhere close. He moved fast, grabbing Orha and holding him close with the sword pressed right up to his neck. He made it clear if the bandits tried anything, Orha was done for. Leo couldn't believe what just happened. For him, this was straight up breaking the code that nobles were supposed to follow. The bandit leader started messing with Karen, tossing out some shade about how nobles are supposed to care about honor more than anything. Karen shot back, honestly confused about why he couldn't just do it. The leader thought Karen stood out, but he said the hostage didn't matter at all. Orha pretty much just stood there, not helping at all, so Karen basically had free rein to mess with him however he wanted. The leader shoved Orha right up to Karen. Leo caught on that they were totally cornered and turned to Karen, wanting to know what he had in mind. Karen didn't even hesitate. She was all in, saying the plan was easy. All they needed to do was take out the leader. The leader saw Karen's blue mana glow and instantly looked uneasy. Karen let Leo know he'd handle the leader, leaving Leo to tackle the skeletons on his own. Leo didn't even have time to figure out what was going on. Karen rushed straight at the leader, not holding back at all. Now Leo was stuck by himself, staring down a whole squad of skeletons that had just climbed out of the ground. Leo froze up when the skeleton soldiers circled around him, seriously questioning how he was supposed to handle this whole squad by himself. The skeletons started closing in on him, ready to throw hands. Karen was already face to face with the leader. Without wasting a second, he went for it. His sword move was on point and hit hard. Karen aimed his sword's power right at the leader. Karen's swing landed straight on the leader, slicing off his hand. The guy dropped, hurting bad. He straight up called Karen a brat. Karen started messing with him, basically calling him out for not making a move earlier. The leader didn't get why Blue Sea Castle was getting involved in their business, but Karen pointed out that this barony was right next to his dad's territory. He let him know he wasn't planning to end him, just taking him over to the castle instead. While all this was going down, Leo was handling the skeletons way better than anyone expected. Karen watched him from afar, quietly rooting for him to keep pushing, just like they learned with the Seawolf sword. It's all about raw strength and not giving up. Karen headed back to where Michael Knox was hurt, checking on the leader. He double-checked and wanted to hear his name one more time, just to make sure he got it right. Right after he gave his answer, Karen just went straight for his leg and stabbed him. No hesitation, just making sure he couldn't fight back. He flashed this cold grin and told the guy to make his crew drop all their weapons. The leader pushed through, hurting the whole time. Michael sat there, totally beat, thinking about how he just got wrecked by 2 kids. Even though he was down bad, he still tossed a warning Karen's way, saying things would get real when they showed up. Nobody from the Liston family could deal with these guys. Karen figured out that the leader was counting on the Black Mages to pull through for him. Karen didn't hold back, doubting if the leader actually believed the Liston family would only send 2 kids on their own. He noticed the magic circle was gone, and just said it made sense for them to have someone watching over them. A huge explosion suddenly went off far away, Karen noticed that messing around with the leader cost them their shot at catching the black mage alive. Out of nowhere, Sabina showed up holding the black mage's head like it was nothing. Leo saw it and instantly wanted to look away. Sabina called it mission failed. They let the most important clue, the living mage, get away. Karen just looked at his aunt and straight up wanted to know if she was at least impressed with how he handled things. Sabina didn't even answer. She just started beating the guy who lost until he blacked out. After that, she turned to Karen and called him out for being reckless, saying he went into enemy territory without thinking. She told him he was basically acting just like her older brother, which honestly caught him off guard. She had to admit, seeing him pull off something that bold was exactly what you'd expect from someone in the Liston family, and honestly, she would have given him some bonus points for that move. If anyone tried to grab a hostage, they'd lose points for that. She wanted to know what was up, so she asked him about it. Karen broke it down, saying he planned to catch them off guard. No one would ever think a noble would grab a hostage, so he figured he could use that to his advantage. Sabina couldn't help but laugh at his logic, thinking he was one of the wildest guys she'd ever run into. Meanwhile, the leader they'd caught just sat there, thinking these people were straight up insane. Sabina let everyone know it was time to head back to Baron Belis's castle, since people were probably going to have a ton of questions. They headed out after the fight was over. The villagers who'd been stuck in cages finally got out, and their families rushed over to meet them. Everyone started hugging and catching up right away. After the fight ended, families came together again with the people they'd been missing. Karen spotted Orha, the bandit, hanging back with this guilty look on his face. She could tell he was feeling bad about something, so she threw a little shade his way, teasing him about having a conscience now. Karen let Orha know it wasn't time for that yet. Orha realized he could easily end up stuck in the barony's dungeon, just like the rest of his crew, but then Karen said he'd actually be heading to Blue Sea Castle with his captain, not getting thrown into a cell at the barony. Leo wondered if it was really safe to just leave Orha without any ropes. Karen told him they needed his help to carry their injured captain. He told Leo to stay sharp and not slack off. One of the villagers who'd just been saved walked up and started backing Orha, kind of worried if he'd end up getting in trouble too. The villager talked about how Orha really looked out for the prisoners. He'd sneak them medicine when they were sick and even handed over his own meals to anyone who was hungry. He begged them to go easy on him. Sabina glanced over at Karen, wanting to know what he thought. Karen checked out Orha, who looked totally stunned, and figured they might go a little easier on him since he was the one who led them to the hideout. Orha was hit with pure gratitude and decided right then that he'd back Karen for life, no matter what. Leo jumped in out of nowhere and got Karen's attention, trying to show her something he thought really mattered. Leo walked over and showed him where the barrel was. Inside, there was this massive magic stone just glowing like crazy. The villagers were out there cheering, hyped up as they threw shade at the bandits they'd just caught. Leo had no doubt the young master would have a whole spread ready when they got back. Karen zoned out for a second, his mind racing. He finally put the pieces together. Those bandits weren't just here by chance. There was a hidden magic stone mine nearby, and even the Baron's family had no clue it was there. Leo caught that sneaky look on his cousin's face right away. He could tell his cousin was up to something again and wanted to know what wild plan he was cooking up this time. Baron Rohan showed up with his dad to meet the people who came to help. Rohan told his guys to toss the prisoners straight into the dungeon. He told Sabina to give up the bandit boss, but Sabina just said she was only there to look out for the group. She pointed over to Karen and Leo, saying they were the ones he should talk to. Rohan set up a chill dinner for everyone, but Karen wasn't having it. She said they had to dip right away and head straight for Blue Sea Castle. Rohan started talking about the mission fee right then. He straight up said his barony didn't have enough cash to cover it all, so he asked if they could push the payment back. Karen's face switched up, looking sneaky now, and he started throwing shade at the barony on purpose. He thought of it as a spot so far out, even the locals barely knew about it. That set Rohan off. Karen let everyone know the bandits weren't even after what they thought. They had a totally different target. Karen showed Rohan the magic stone, and he was totally caught off guard. He honestly didn't even know there was a mine anywhere on his land. Now that he had everything lined up, Karen let everyone know he had an idea to throw out there too. Karen rolled up with his plan and showed Baron Rohan how teaming up with Velos to develop the magic stone mine could actually work for both sides. The deal would only happen if the castle put up the starting money and sent their own guards. Rohan was caught off guard, thinking this guy might not even get how serious his words were. But then it hit him. Teaming up with the powerful Liston family could be a massive win for his barony, no matter what. Rohan realized Karen had planned everything out, and he couldn't believe how bold she was for someone her age, handling stuff this serious like it was nothing. Karen pointed out that setting things up this way could bring a Liston Knights garrison to the barony, locking down their defense issues and giving the economy a solid boost too. Rohan wanted to know what percentage he was thinking about for the shares. Karen swerved the question, basically saying a kid his age shouldn't get into the nitty-gritty of a project like this. She made it clear this was something Rohan needed to bring up with his dad instead. Rohan said he'd check in with his dad and get back to them soon. Later on, Karen went to Lady Sabina to ask her something. Sabina had a feeling things wouldn't stay simple at the bandit spot. She told them it was because of the black mage she'd met before. Turns out, he wasn't just some random magic guy. He was actually Tad de la Hada, a guy on the Empire's most wanted list and a sixth circle mage. Sabina called out the guys for wasting time on the easy stuff like chasing after small fish and messing with bandits instead of locking in on what actually mattered. Sabina kept the lesson going, saying real strength comes from going up against tough enemies. She pointed out that if they had handled the black mage on their own, messing around with rabble would have just been a waste of time. Because of that, she counted the mission as a flop, and Karen just nodded, taking it without any fuss. After that, she looked over at Leo, who was just sitting there, kind of annoyed that nobody seemed to notice him. She was actually impressed with him, saying he did way better than she thought he would, especially since this was his first time dealing with the undead. She hyped him up to help him believe in himself more. Back at Blue Sea Castle, Hello came back after his trip to the capital. When he showed up, his crew was there waiting, letting him know the knight was back from the west. They also said Karen, Leo, and Sabina were on their way back from their mission. Out of nowhere, a messenger showed up, looking like he had some serious news straight from the Imperial Palace. He tore open the letter and just stared. What he read totally caught him off guard. The Emperor dipped out of the capital without ever bringing this up. The Emperor called up his grandson Karen and told him to come out to the capital himself. He was on his way back, riding the train. Orha had Michael, his captain, slung over his shoulder like it was nothing. Michael thought it was the perfect time to get out, so he tried to convince Orha they should make a break for it while security was slacking. Orha just snapped and hit him, straight up shutting him down. He couldn't forget that he was the one who'd called him useless, like he didn't matter at all. When they got back to Blue Sea Castle, their families were waiting for them. Bally looked around and couldn't help but point out how wild Karen's place still was, tossing in some sarcasm. Karen wasn't having it and fired right back, making sure Bally knew not to mess with her. Bali greeted his son with real warmth, feeling glad to see him. While that was happening, Sabina talked to her brother and quickly figured out that Halo was probably the one who called him over. Karen had stirred up problems in the barony of Belos. Bali was hyped for his nephew Leo, proud that everyone had already heard about what Leo pulled off before he even showed up. Leo was pretty stoked, thinking his dad and grandpa would actually be proud seeing what he'd done. Right after, Karen said he was wiped out and headed upstairs to crash. Things suddenly got real when Sabina brought up the weird stuff going on with the Empire's politics, asking Bali if he was clued in on any of it. Bali broke it down. Every big group out there, besides their own family, was basically teaming up fast, all rallying around the Salmon Duchy and the Diaz Marquesat. Sabina mentioned that their dad, Halu, was supposed to link up with a few families in the city to figure out what was really going on, but after his meeting with the Emperor didn't go the way he hoped, he scrapped all his plans. Bali broke it down, saying those two families helped take down the last emperor and put the new one in charge. Now they pretty much run everything. Sabina couldn't help but think about how her brother Halo stepped back from the spotlight just to help out the Empire, and now, seeing how people were treating him, it honestly didn't sit right with her. They both realized that peaceful days weren't going to last much longer and knew it was time for their family to step up and do something. Sabina noticed there was actually something good about what happened. She realized Karen's move might be the smartest play right now because it gives them a solid excuse to roll out troops and start taking over other families' territories. For them, it's the perfect chance to level up their influence. She thought Karen stood out from other guys since he helped the family right when they really needed it. Bali mentioned to his aunt that she always hypes him up, but she just brushed it off and said she wasn't actually giving him props. After that, Sir Xerxes showed up and gave them props for taking down the runaway bandits. He let everyone know he was about to start questioning the bandit boss Orha had hauled in, promising he'd find out everything that guy knew. He started wondering who Orha really was. Karen broke it down for everyone right now. He counted as a bandit too, but since he'd helped them out as an informant, he deserved a break. Karen told the others to go easy on him and then let him go, saying he'd make him his own servant. Xerxes was cool with the plan. The boys were about to crash and take a break, but Xerxes stepped in and made it clear they weren't done yet. Their mission still had stuff left to do, so rest had to wait. Karen wanted to know when Xerxes showed up. Xerxes told her he'd just gotten there recently and reminded her they had to get started on their report. Karen wanted to know if they really had to do the reports alone, but Xerxes was chill about it and let them team up. Karen didn't waste any time trying to dump the job on Leo, saying he'd already handled all the tough stuff. He tried talking them into it, reminding them that Uncle Tiles was definitely going to see the report. This was Leo's shot to level up, so he zeroed in on his own wins in the report. That actually got through to him. Once they got back, Sir Xerxes wasted no time and told everyone to throw the prisoners in lockup. Sabina just tossed the criminal's head over to him, pretty much letting him know that his reports would cover the rest. Karen wished Leo luck with his report, and right after that, he let everyone know he was heading over to the Mana training room. He was ready to try out the fourth form he just unlocked. Xerxes just stood there, totally caught off guard by how fired up he was. While all that was going down, Hello called the whole family together for a last-minute meeting. He broke down that they called everyone together because of some stuff they found out while fighting off demons that had been popping up near the castle lately. He told Heinrich to go get the Knight Commander. Xeris showed up and handed him a chunk of demon skin. Hello let them know this piece actually came from the Western Celestial Dome area. Hello noticed right away that the dark mana in the skin wasn't normal at all. He froze when he recognized it was the Emperor's, the guy who'd lost everything. Hello thought about it and came up with two ideas. One was that maybe his will was just hanging around in the world. People started wondering if the old Emperor might actually still be out there somewhere. Hello realized this whole thing was tied to what was already going down in the Empire. Then he dropped another update. Word about what happened in the barony of Belos had already gotten to the Emperor. Karen got a direct invite to the capital just for her. Hello let everyone know he was sending Leo and the Seawolf Knights to go with Karen. He made it clear he'd check with Karen before deciding anything, and he wasn't about to make him do something he didn't want to, since he was still just a kid. Hello really wanted to figure out what was going on in Karen's head. Back when he cut that deal with Baron Belos, he told Xeris to go get the guy. Xeris walked into the training room and spotted Karen, just chilling there, deep in meditation. Karen wanted to know when Xeris showed up, and he told her he'd just gotten there a little while ago. Karen let him know that only close family and Sir Xeris could come in, but thinking back, he couldn't remember Xeris ever stepping foot in the training room before. That pretty much meant something serious was going down. Xeris let him know that he had to show up at the family council. They were going to talk about a trip to the capital that was coming up soon. Xeris let Karen know that the family boss wanted him at the council and that he'd get the full story straight from him. When Karen showed up, Hello mentioned he'd just found out about Karen wrapping up his first mission, and Karen nodded to confirm it. Hello came up to him right away and wanted to know why he went off on his own. He went way past his limits when he tried to make deals with the House of Belos. He started to wonder if acting all high and mighty was actually just disrespecting everyone around him. Karen caught on that he was getting grilled, not hyped up. He didn't back down though. He straight up said he'd only made one offer to young Baron Belos, and Belos had agreed without anyone forcing him. Inside the council hall, Karen stood in front of his grandfather, trying to explain why he did what he did. When Hello pressed him about what could actually matter more than acting proper, Karen just straight up said he thought something else was way more important than all those fancy rules. Karen just told him this was all about family honor. He was honestly blown away by how good that answer was. He figured Karen could have easily bragged about the win and claimed all the credit, but instead, Karen actually put the family first. That move was solid, real, top-tier behavior. Hello took everything into account and made his call. He knew Karen's offer was really good for the family, so he told his son Bali to take care of the official talks and handle the details. Bali said he'd head out to the barony of Belos early the next morning. Hello thought it was actually pretty cool for a dad to shine because of what his son pulled off. He greeted everyone, then switched gears to talk about the Emperor's letter. He let Karen know that His Majesty had called him in, since word about what he'd done had already made it all the way to the capital. Karen figured out that Xeris meant the Emperor's letter showed up at Blue Sea Castle before Hello even got back. He started thinking about whether the Emperor's spy network was actually that quick. Karen sat there for a second, figuring the powerful nobles who pulled the strings on the Emperor were the real reason she got this invite so fast. It definitely wasn't the Emperor's idea. Karen got the choice to stay back if she wanted. Hello started thinking about Karen, pretty sure he already got what heading to the capital right now was all about. Hello started thinking hard about what would actually happen if he said yes or no. Bali realized Halo shouldn't have handed the decision over to Karen, but before he could say anything, Karen jumped in and made it clear, since the Emperor called him, it was on him to handle it. He thought this would be his chance to meet up with his mom's dad again. Karen wanted to know if he was heading out solo, but Hello let her know that Leo was tagging along. Plus, Hans and his squad were there handling security. Karen looked around and wondered why there were extra guards when his grandfather was already there. Meanwhile, Hello messed around and said the guards weren't really there to protect him. They were more like backup just in case he started causing chaos. Hello let everyone know the group would be heading out in 3 days. Later on, Bali wrapped up his deal with Baron Rohan. The deal was set. The Liston family would take 80% of the mine, leaving the Belos family with the other 20%. Bali got stuck when he saw another rule he couldn't really figure out. It said that 5% of Belos' share, basically a quarter of what Belos had, was supposed to go straight to Karen and Leo. He thought that was way too much to pay for just a simple job. He wanted to know why Rohan, who basically crushed it at the Imperial Academy, made that call. Rohan just laid it out straight, saying this whole thing was basically an investment. He wanted to get on the good side of the two young wolves, since they were going to run Blue Sea Castle someday. Bali thought Rohan was full of himself for acting like he already knew what these kids could do, and honestly, he found it pretty disrespectful. Bali and Rohan started throwing shade at each other, and Bali actually respected how bold Rohan was getting. When the boys finally got called up, they were all in and didn't hesitate to say yes. Rohan talked about how teaming up like this meant a lot to his family. For him, it was a point of pride. While they were heading out, Leo started wondering about something and looked over at Karen. After they wrapped up the deal with the barony of Balos, Leo wanted to know how they'd split their 5% cut. Karen stayed chill and told him straight up he'd take 9 out of 10 parts and Leo would get just 1. Leo definitely didn't see that coming. Karen stepped up and threw out a threat that had him freaking out, so he caved right away. Bali stood with his aide, both of them taking in what was happening. The aide noticed how the two boys, who always used to go all out against each other when they were younger, were now right there in front of them. Now, they were always together. When Leo finally made it to the capital, he couldn't help but get hyped, but also a little anxious. He'd only heard stories about this place online and honestly had no clue how he was supposed to act here. Karen tried to calm him down, but Leo pushed back. He was about to meet the Emperor, so of course he was hyped. He started thinking about hitting up parties in Dickus, hoping to meet some of the coolest girls around. Sabina caught part of what they were saying and decided to jump in. She pointed out that Dacus was packed with tough fighters and said it'd be a solid experience for everyone. She grabbed some wine glasses, ready to hype everyone up for finishing their first mission. Karen rolled her eyes and joked about there being no wine glasses in a 13-year-old's room, then just went ahead and poured the wine into regular water cups. Sabina wanted to know if Leo had ever tried wine before. He owned up to the fact that Karen had already handed him some earlier. Sabina handed Leo a glass, and he took it without hesitating. Sabina lifted her drink, giving props for how much they'd leveled up, and Karen nodded, grateful to have her as his teacher. She let them know her 3-year promise to look out for them had ended. She seemed a bit bummed she wouldn't get to watch whatever chaos they'd cause next in the capital. Leo heard she was heading back to the North Sea soon, and that news hit him hard. He wondered if this meant she was gone for good and they wouldn't get to see her anymore. Sabina looked at him and just rolled her eyes, not really taking his feelings seriously. He told him straight up to skip any parties if Karen was going to be there. Everyone knew Karen was the type to turn heads the second she walked in. She had the looks, skills, and knew exactly what to say to get everyone watching her. Leo started freaking out, worried that Karen might mess up his shot at getting married. Karen just shook her head, thinking he was being dumb. Karen told Leo to quit talking and just keep drinking. Later on, over at Blue Sea Castle, Bali let Halo know that the talks with Bellas wrapped up and everything went their way. Halo couldn't believe it when they actually agreed to give up some of their share to Karen and Leo. Bali pointed out that the young Baron had serious pull, since he called the deal a move for the future. Halo noticed how sharp the young barons were and figured they'd just picked up a solid ally. Halo put Bali in charge of everything that had to do with the Bellows barony. Bali couldn't shake the feeling that his dad called him over for something more than just a pat on the back, since getting any compliment out of him was pretty rare. He knew something was off, and sure enough, Halo came clean, turns out. The Emperor calling for Karen like this almost never happens. He'd never called anyone else from the family except Halu before, so this was new. But then Halu dropped something wild. When he met with the Emperor one-on-one, he could still see the fear in the Emperor's eyes. That hit differently, knowing the top guy in the Empire was still shook around him. Halu kept talking with Bali, laying out how the Emperor seemed scared of him. That got Halu thinking there had to be someone else pulling the strings behind Karen's invite. Bali could tell this whole thing was probably about politics, and he couldn't figure out why Halo didn't just say no to the Emperor, especially with how messy things were right now. Halo made it clear he never said no. He wanted to see just how far Karen could really go. He broke it down, saying Karen got picked by the founding ancestor's sword, guillotine. That basically put him in the spotlight for the whole family, so there was no way he'd avoid all the drama and threats coming from outside. Halo saw the invitation as a challenge. If Karen was going to be the one to take care of the family down the line, he had to prove he could handle stuff like this. Halo turned to his son Bali, checking if he was nervous about it. Bali felt something hit him hard inside, but he kept it together and didn't let it show. He stood there, totally sure of himself, letting everyone know he had his son's back. Halo didn't see that coming. The reaction totally caught him off guard. He cracked a smile, thinking that was honestly a pretty awesome answer. The next day, Sabina got ready to head back to the North Sea. Xerus wanted to know if she planned on saying bye to the guys before she left. She told them not to worry about it since she actually had fun sneaking his stolen wine with everyone last night. He figured it was smarter to slip out without making a scene since the guys were deep in packing mode, getting ready for their trip. They said their goodbyes, and Xerus told her he'd have more wine ready when she came back. Right before heading out, Sabina shot a quick look at Karen, who was just watching her from his window. She left after that, saying goodbye and letting him know they'd see each other again. Karen always saw the North Sea as his spot, like he belonged there. He started looking around for something to eat and maybe some wine to kill time. He never expected Sabina to dip that fast. Right after Sabina dipped, Karen figured his uncles were about to start doing their thing. Right when he started thinking about it, his Uncle Tiles just showed up behind him out of nowhere. He jumped, totally caught off guard. At the train station, the servants handled all the bags for the guys. Leo couldn't figure out why everyone was making such a big deal about it. Heinrich let everyone know it was nothing weird, they were just heading out to meet the Emperor since they had to show up for their family. Karen wasn't too happy about hanging out with Hans's crew. Ziris tried to say they were just there to watch out for everyone, but Hans shot back, acting like their real job was just to keep the group from messing around. Before heading out, Tiles stopped by Karen's room. After they said, "What's up?" Tiles went in to see him. Tiles let him know he'd already heard about his trip to the capital, then said he needed a favor. Karen looked over at Tiles, hoping he wouldn't pull the same stunts in the capital that he always did back at Blue Sea Castle. Karen nodded, but then it hit him. His uncle had basically just said he'd been keeping an eye on him the whole time. People like Tiles had already told him the capital was packed with enemies, all just waiting for that one moment to take down his family. If Karen gave them any reason, he was ready to step in and make sure the guy paid for it, no questions asked. The second the Tiles were gone, everything switched up. Karen's face switched up. He wasn't even fazed by his uncle's threat, just saw right through it. His uncle was clearly flexing that firstborn status, trying to act all important, but Karen wasn't having it. In his head, Karen decided he was going to flip the script and show his uncle what's up. The train station was ready to go, with everything set for the trip. Karen and Hans were going back and forth, both clearly annoyed with each other. Orha, who used to be a bandit, walked up to them and let him know he was grateful for getting a second shot. Karen just shrugged it off, then messed with him by saying he'd only end up taking him to the capital just to dump him in some rough prison, basically telling him not to get lazy. Orha really didn't want Karen to leave him behind, so he tried to convince her to stay. Karen just watched him and basically let him know she'd decide based on how he acted. Ziris pulled the guys aside, dropping one last tip before they left. He told them to lay low, not mess around, and make sure to come back in one piece. Right when the train was getting ready to leave, Bali sprinted onto the platform, trying to catch his son before the train left. He said he showed up just to catch him one last time before heading out. He also mentioned that his mom's dad couldn't wait to see him show up too. Bali pulled his son in for a hug, hoping he'd make it back in one piece. He tried to keep things chill and avoid any problems, but Karen just found it funny. Once the train took off, Tiles was still chilling in his office. He found out that his second son's wife, Raphael's wife, was up to something sneaky in the capital. He chose to chill and just wait it out for now. While riding the train, Karen turned to Hans and wanted to know how long they'd be stuck on there. He told them it's basically a 6-hour trip since you have to go straight through Tiba's autonomous territory. They started chatting about Tiba, this city that's kinda different from the rest. In Tiba, regular people actually get to pick their own mayor, which isn't something you see everywhere. The place is all about business and factories, not really farming. Over there, how much cash someone had basically decided where they stood. Hans let everyone know that the reason they've got so much pull in the Empire is because they're loaded, but the other lords are always keeping tabs on what they're up to. Karen talked about how he noticed people in the province would sometimes just dip out and head for places where they didn't have to deal with sketchy lords bossing them around. Hans pointed out that people around here were chill with Blue Sea Castle and usually trusted their knights to handle the big jobs. The boys started talking about sneaking off to check out the city later, trying to keep it low-key. Karen noticed something weird going on when his sword started acting up, like it could sense someone or something nearby. Karen noticed his sword acting weird all of a sudden, and that's when he realized it was picking up on some serious danger nearby. He started thinking maybe his uncles, Styles or Raphael, had set him up by sneaking someone into the group to take him out. He shrugged it off pretty fast, knowing there's no way they'd actually pull something that dumb. Leo spotted right away that something was off with Karin and tried to get his attention. Karin, locked in and thinking fast, figured the real problem had to be coming from outside. Not wasting any time, he told Hans to hit up the autonomous territory of Tiva ASAP. Hans was stuck trying to figure out why things suddenly got so intense, but Karen just shouted that they had no time. She told him to hurry up and warn the others in the cars that something big was about to go down. Hans froze for a second, then quickly did what he was told. He passed the warning to all the escorts, and everyone locked in, getting ready for whatever was coming their way. Karen sat there trying to figure out what kind of threat could actually go after a train that's already moving. He couldn't wrap his head around how someone would even pull that off. Just off to the side of the tracks, some masked guys were getting ready to pull off whatever they'd planned. The leader let everyone know it was finally time. He and his crew snapped into action. With the train getting close, they rushed to set up explosive barrels, each one rigged with a fuse, right on the tracks. After they wrapped everything up, one guy sparked the fuse, and the leader let everyone know to get ready because things were about to blow. The train slammed into the barrels, setting off a huge explosion that knocked it off the tracks and tore it apart. While all this was going down, things were happening over in Tiba, the autonomous territory. The mayor sat at the head of a wild meeting, trying to keep things under control. People in the room were basically yelling over each other, throwing out accusations left and right. Some were saying others were hiding money and the National Tax Service was all over them, while the rest fought back, flipping the blame and saying the same stuff right back. Things started heating up, and one guy started calling out the mayor, telling him to go after his rivals and treat them like straight-up criminals. The mayor really regretted showing up to that meeting. He sat there wondering if life would have been easier if he'd just called it quits after being finance minister. He felt bad seeing the city turn into total chaos. There was always this non-stop rivalry going on between the Noble Guild and the Commoner Guild. In the middle of the meeting, an aide suddenly walked in looking like he had something important to say to the mayor. After sending everyone else away and shutting down their arguments, she finally let him come closer. One of the guys still hanging around wondered if the news was about the tax thing, but the mayor just lit up a cigarette, totally chill, like that whole investigation didn't even matter anymore. He got asked if they'd called off the investigation. He shot back a straight-up no, not caring at all about the investigation and just telling them to forget it. He dropped some wild news just 5 minutes earlier. The train from the Liston family's place to the capital blew up, and the Grand Duke's 2 grandsons were actually on that train. The guy just froze, totally caught off guard. The mayor just laid it out straight, not even flinching. Basically, everyone there might as well count themselves out. Back at the crash site, Karen pushed himself up out of the wreck. Hans looked over, checking if he was hurt, but Karen just shrugged it off. Nothing serious, just some small scratches. Hans didn't waste any time. He wanted to know what was going on right away. They told him out of the 11 people, Dell got hurt pretty bad and 2 others just had minor stuff. Another update dropped from Orha's squad 2 guys down on their side. Karen realized things had to be pretty serious if someone like Orha, who usually stayed in the background, was the one sending in the news. Karen turned to Hans, wanting to know where they actually were. Hans let them know they were around 10 kilometers out from Tiba's autonomous zone. He also mentioned that the territory already got the heads up before the guys even woke up. Hans let them know that backup was coming. Right after, he told Karen and Leo to dip and get as far away as they could. He told his squad he'd hold things down so they could get ready. But right then, Karen's sword guillotine started acting up again. He suddenly caught on that they weren't the only ones there. Someone was about to set them up. Hans wanted to bail, but Karen just shook her head, basically saying sorry and letting him know they couldn't dip out now. Hans wanted to know what was up, so Karen told him these guys had trashed the Emperor's prized railway. That kind of move was straight-up rebellion. He started thinking about how long they could actually dodge people who were this bold. He looked over at Leo, checking if he was still down to fight. Leo was all in, no hesitation. Karen realized they were out of choices. There was just one move left. One of the masked guys stumbled after getting hit out of nowhere, and that's when Karen showed up behind him, looking pretty confident. Karen didn't hold back. She decided everyone had to go and kicked off the fight right then. The leader of the attackers realized there were way more defenders than he thought, and you could tell he wasn't ready for that. Hans told the second squad to jump out of the cars and set up a defense, making sure the young masters stayed safe. Hans let Karen know that all the enemy attackers were at least 3-star level, so things were about to get tough. Karen checked out the guy leading the group up front and could tell right away he had that 6-star fighter vibe. The leader called out his name, Karen Listine, and told him to drop his weapon and give up. Right away, Karen picked up that the leader's voice sounded weird, like it was changed by magic or something. The leader also said if Karen just went along with it, the knights and servants could chill and wouldn't get hurt. Karen figured it out pretty quick. Whoever was after Hans clearly wanted him alive, not gone. She let him know straight up what was really going on. He wanted to know if the guy really got what was about to happen. Hans totally picked up on what Karen was getting at and started pleading with him to chill and not go through with it. Karen started yelling, confused about why he was getting in the way. She pointed out that since they couldn't take him out, that had to mean he was the one who could actually finish them. Leo just shook his head, kind of annoyed at how wild his cousin was acting. Meanwhile, Hans told everyone to get ready and jump into the fight. He stepped up to keep the 2 young masters safe. Things got intense real quick as the fight kicked off. The Listane Knights locked in, closing ranks around the 2 guys while they threw down hard against the attackers. Things got wild as the Knights and the masked guys really started going at it, and the fight just kept getting more intense. Karen kept weaving through the masked guys, taking them on one after another. Karen noticed the attacker holding back and started roasting him for not making a move. He even said he'd walk over himself if that's what it took. Hearing that, the leader told his crew to back off. He wanted to take care of Karen on his own. Karen pointed out that the boss had finally made an appearance. Hans moved right in front of him and blocked his way, basically telling him to chill because this opponent was way too dangerous to mess with. The leader started messing with Hans, calling him a sea knight and saying he was basically running straight into trouble. Hans wasn't backing down. He squared up, locked eyes, and just went for it, charging straight at him with a yell that echoed through the whole place. Hans squared up against the masked leader, ready for the fight to kick off. The leader came at Hans hard, really going all out. Hans barely managed to hold him off, struggling to keep up with the pressure. He couldn't believe he actually blocked that heavy hit. Watching the leader throw down, Hans started to piece it together. The way the guy moved was too clean, almost like he'd seen it before. Hans started thinking maybe this was Sion Hakimi, the 6-star knight from the Sultanate of Bavar. Hans couldn't figure out what a knight from the Sultanate of Bavar was doing in the Empire's land, especially since the two places were supposed to have a non-aggression pact. He started thinking about why he was going after the Listane family in the first place, since there wasn't really any beef between the duchy and the Sultanate. Hans was still trying to figure things out, but he was set on getting answers himself. With the way the fight was going, he actually felt pretty confident. The two young masters were holding their own too, so things were finally looking up for their side. Hakimi caught Hans slipping for just a second and didn't waste any time. He stepped up and landed a strong hit. Hakimi clowned Hans for losing focus, calling out that his setup with the knights had already fallen apart. Hans got fired up and tried to push back, but Hakimi didn't let up. He hit Hans again and just made it clear fighting back wasn't going to work, basically telling him to give up. Hakimi glanced around and realized his guys were already down, and his whole setup was falling apart. Hans gave Hakimi and his crew a shot at giving up, promising they'd stay alive if they called it quits. He honestly wondered why they'd want to throw it all away so far from home. Hakimi just shook his head and stuck to what he had to do, not backing down from his goal at all. Out of nowhere, he just let loose, and his power exploded. The mana inside him snapped back hard like it couldn't handle it. Hans could tell Hakimi wasn't scared of dying at all, and he knew this wild move was about to put both young masters straight into danger. Hans realized he couldn't hold back anymore. Seeing how wild his opponent was going, he decided to go all in, ready to throw down with everything he had. Right when it mattered most, Karen called out, letting everyone know he wasn't happy with Hans. Out of nowhere, Karen showed up and let Hans know he still had one job: keep that guy from messing things up. He shot him a look, basically mocking if he was about to give up already. Hakimi looked over at Karen, who just nodded with confidence, basically letting everyone know he was Karen Listine. Karen moved fast, closed the gap, and took Hakimi down instantly with one hit. Hakimi was barely hanging on, taking his final breaths. Before he was gone, he called Karen a monster. Karen just took it in stride and acted like it was the best compliment she could get. He suddenly realized his sword, guillotine, was starting to vibrate again. Karen picked up on the fact that things weren't safe yet. She looked at the dying Hakimi, thinking he probably still had something up his sleeve. Hakimi told him straight up he didn't regret anything about Karen. He just threw out a weird apology, and right then, you could tell something wild was building up around him. Karen froze, not expecting what just happened. Right then, Hans snapped into action and called out to the knights, telling them to keep Lord Leo safe. He just stood there frozen in the middle of the fight, not moving at all. Hans didn't even think twice. He jumped right in front of Karen, using his own body to block the blast that was about to go off. Karen started freaking out, wanting to know what was going on, and Hans let him know that Hakimi had gone and used a self-destruct spell. Right when the explosion kicked off, Hans felt it was on him, thinking he messed up. He looked at Karen, feeling bad and blaming himself for how things turned out. When Hans was down to his last seconds, he looked at Karen, desperate, hoping she'd somehow pull him out of it and keep him alive. The whole place blew up, tearing through everything nearby. While everything was going wild, Karen picked up on a weird voice calling out the human who messed around and woke it up. The voice said it hadn't had night blood in ages, so it was ready to step up. It told Karen to squeeze his eyes shut unless he wanted his eyeballs to pop. Once the smoke settled, Karen saw Hans knocked out on the floor and did her best to get him up. Hans snapped awake, already annoyed. Karen got called out for not caring much after the other guy put himself on the line to protect him, but Karen just brushed it off, acting like he never needed saving in the first place. Karen's sword suddenly spoke up, cutting them off and throwing some shade. It basically bragged that Karen only made it out alive because of its help. He realized he should have just said thanks. Karen just stood there, not moving, when he noticed his sword actually started talking. He glanced around, taking in the wrecked scene left behind by the blast, trying to figure out what just went down. Karen looked at the sword and tried to figure out if it had a mind of its own. This sword was built using the souls of some wild blacksmiths who totally lost it. When someone compared it to something else, the sword basically lost its cool and acted like it was ready to take Karen's head off if he said it again. Karen couldn't figure out why the sword bothered saving him in the first place if it was going to get this heated over something so small. The sword let him know it burned through every bit of mana it had just to keep him alive after that explosion. If it hadn't done that, his head would have been gone already. The sword started acting tired, like it just wanted a break. He started thinking if there was a way to get mana without having to fight all the time, and the idea popped up that maybe it could pull mana from Karen's blood too. Karen figured the sword wanted its owner's blood, so he just thought, yeah, this thing's gotta be cursed or something. Right then, some knights rolled up. Their leader said his name was Haley, and he was in charge of the Tiva self-defense forces. Hans didn't waste any time. He stepped up and let Haley know who he was. While they chatted, Karen slid his sword back into its sheath. The sword started acting up, saying it couldn't talk from in there, but Karen just brushed it off and told it to chill. Haley spotted Karen and knew right away he was the Grand Duke Hallow's grandson. He let everyone know that his region would own up to what happened and take full responsibility for the mess. He said he was there because the mayor sent him, and his job was to get the ducal family out safely. Karen was cool with that and told him to handle all the people who were hurt too. He was just chilling in the carriage. Hans checked in with Karen, wondering if he really wanted to leave Blue Sea Castle so soon. There was still a chance things could go sideways, and the people handling the scene were probably going to be there for a while. Karen let Hans know everything was cool. He let him know he'd already hit up Sir Xeris, so there was no reason to stress too much. He switched gears and asked Hans if he had any clue who the guy was that blew himself up. Hans told him the guy was Sween Hakimi, a 6-star knight straight out of the Sultanate of Bavar. Karen started to realize just how serious things were getting. He started thinking about whether the no-fighting deal his grandpa made with the Sultan was about to fall apart. Leo knew things between the Empire and the Sultanate had been getting worse, but he was sure it wasn't bad enough for something like this to go down. Karen decided that what Hakimi did was enough to start a fight. Inside the carriage, Karen saw Leo just staring at his hands, still covered in blood. He looked totally out of it, not even catching what Karen said before. Leo kept looking at his hands, confused and trying to figure out why they wouldn't stop shaking. Karen told him it made sense to freak out since it was his first time killing someone. She said getting used to ending lives isn't something that happens overnight. He let Leo know he had to push through since that's just how life goes. Not long after, a guard came by and said they were almost at Tiba, the autonomous territory. As soon as Karen got into the city, he glanced out the window and noticed how everything looked super fancy. The buildings were next level, and he couldn't help but think about how wild it all seemed. The mayor showed up with a big smile and made sure they felt at home in Tiba. The mayor looked pretty relieved seeing everyone made it back safe. He let them know his team was locked in and ready to go all out to find out who was really behind what happened. He also promised to help out however he could with the Listain family's investigation. Karen cut him off and let the mayor know right away. They already understood that Tiba's territory had nothing to do with the attack. The mayor finally started to relax, and you could tell he was way less tense. Hans noticed the mayor wasn't the same guy he remembered from back when he was the finance minister. The mayor just shook his head, clearly wishing he'd never taken the job. He realized he'd been talking too casually around the Duke's grandson and quickly said sorry for it. But Karen just told him to chill and drop the formal talk, since all that respectful stuff around older people always got on his nerves anyway. The mayor paused for a second, kind of unsure, because he thought it wasn't cool to just talk casually with someone from a top-tier Duke family. He eventually took Karen up on the offer, but right after, he caught himself when he messed up and called him by his first name. The mayor wanted to switch things up, so he told everyone they should head somewhere else to keep the conversation going. Karen sat across from the mayor in a small, closed-off room, calling him out on how the railway got wrecked. She brought up the fact that the attackers blew everything up with real explosives, not magic or anything like that. He let everyone know that if you want explosives, you gotta go through the Military Supply Administration. The Empire keeps a tight grip on it, so trying to sneak any out is pretty much impossible. Karen started thinking out loud, curious if someone had brought the explosives in from outside the Empire, maybe even from the Sultanate of Bavar. He brought up to the mayor that only the Empire and the Sultanate could actually make explosives this good. Then he threw out that if merchants from Tiba were caught up in this kind of smuggling, the mayor would end up looking bad. The mayor couldn't believe how spot on Karen's guess was. The mayor started thinking that if he didn't back Karen's theory, everyone might look at him like he was in on it. He had no choice but to admit that smuggling probably was going down. The mayor was straight up annoyed deep down, blaming those smugglers for landing him in such a mess. Right then, Karen told him there was something important he needed to keep in mind. Some of the Seawolf Knights and people from Blue Sea Castle got hurt when all this went down. The mayor could tell he was getting boxed in. Everyone knew the Listain family always paid back big, whether it was a favor or a debt, and if he didn't play along, he was basically done for. The mayor, trying to switch things up, started asking Karen how his dad was doing. He acted like he totally knew the guy, and even said he was tight with Karen's grandpa, Sir Gale. Karen flashed a fake smile, noticing how the mayor started dropping big names out of nowhere. That just showed he was a real politician through and through. Right then, an aide rushed in, clearly stressed, holding a message from the capital. The mayor figured he had it all figured out, probably news that the Imperial Guard had already left. Turns out it wasn't only the Imperial Guard on the move. The Internal Revenue Service's top guy actually dipped out too, leading the 1st Special Division straight to Taba. The aide let him know the commissioner was Gale Barrington, the guy everyone called the Demon King. The mayor heard someone mention the name Gale, and right away, he froze. He couldn't help but wonder if the real Sir Gale had actually shown up. He looked over at Karen, wondering if Karen had seen this coming. Karen nodded, saying his mom's dad was always there for him. Like, no matter what, if something went down, his grandpa would show up ready to help, no questions asked. That night, the IRS 1st Special Division rolled into Tiba, and right away the whole city felt on edge. The usually packed streets got way quieter, and everyone could tell something serious was about to go down. Commissioner Gale Barrington walked ahead, looking serious, and everyone could tell things probably weren't going to go their way. Grand Duke Hallett showed up just in time, watching everything go down from the sidelines. His attendant pointed out how fast he'd gotten there, but Hallett just kept his focus. He was only moving this quick because it was all about his grandson. At the same time, the merchants in Tiba were pretty worked up and didn't know what was going on. Nobody saw it coming when the tax guys rolled up that night, giving them zero heads up or time to get ready. People started grumbling when they heard the first special division, yeah, the one everyone knows about, was taking over the case. The meeting hall was pretty loud, with everyone talking over each other while the mayor tried to keep things chill. That's when Karen and his crew walked in. One of the older merchants backed the mayor up, making it clear things were getting serious. Karen stood in front of the group of merchants and broke down just how bad things had gotten. He let them know it wasn't just the Emperor's railway that got wrecked. Stuff went down with the Grand Duke's grandson and some people from Blue Sea Castle too. He explained that the attack happened because someone sneaked explosives in, probably through the trade guilds in Tiva's area. Then he looked at them, making it clear that things just got real for everyone in the room. The merchants froze for a second, not expecting things to go this way. They started making excuses, saying they just needed a bit more time to get ready. Karin wanted to know who the merchant was, so he asked for his name. The merchant said he was Viscount Homer, the guy running the Homer Trading Group. Karen stayed cool and told the Viscount he'd take his name straight to his grandfather at the National Tax Service. The Viscount panicked and started begging Karen to chill, admitting he'd just said stuff without thinking it through. Just then, word got out that the 1st Special Division and the Commissioner had pulled up. Gale showed up with his crew, ready to handle business. He let everyone know the tax investigation on all the trade groups was starting right away. He let everyone know that the tax guys got tipped off about people stacking up cash from smuggling and dodging taxes. The Emperor wasn't joking around. He wanted every detail checked out and expected everyone to help out, no excuses. Leo leaned over to Hans, trying to figure out if the 1st Special Division was as intense as everyone said. Hans told him these guys handle all the big shots, top merchants and nobles. Their targets have so much power that the division can even call in the Imperial Guard if things get wild. They could tell these things were seriously creepy. It had been 3 years since Gale saw Karen, so when Gale walked up to him, he was all smiles and made sure Karen knew he remembered the time apart. Later, Gale and Karen found a quiet spot to talk. Gale checked in on his grandson, wanting to make sure he was actually all right, and Karen told him he was good. Gale tried to see if Karen had any guesses about who might be behind everything, but Karen just shook it off and said he didn't. Gale brought up that maybe this was something going on inside the family, but Karen shut that down fast. She figured if his uncles were behind it, there wouldn't be any clues left to find. He pointed out that the people behind this whole thing actually wanted to get noticed, leaving obvious clues on purpose. They tried to make it seem like the Sultanate of Bavar was behind it. Gale looked at his grandson, wondering if he was planning to go after the people who caused all this on his own. He told him straight up it wasn't a good idea. He got a reality check. There's always someone stronger out there, and this place definitely wasn't safe yet. For now, he was told to keep his head down and not make any noise. They'd head to the capital in the morning, just like the Emperor said. He told him not to worry. The adults had it covered. Karen nodded, smiling, and said he'd keep it cool. Gale headed off, thinking a blackout was about to hit. It clicked for him. Karen was never planning to stick to his word anyway. That night, over at Owen's place, things got pretty hectic with people rushing around, trying to pack up a carriage as fast as possible. His wife leaned out from the carriage, wanting to know if he was coming with them. He told her not to worry, said he'd be right behind, then waved so the carriage could head out. Owen stood there, just watching as the carriage took off, his family's voices fading out behind him. He realized he'd been the one to send them off first, and now he was stuck, annoyed at how messed up everything had gotten. Somewhere else in the city, Grand Duke Hallett stood up on a rooftop, keeping an eye on everything. One of his guys gave him the heads up that their targets were on the move. Hallett didn't waste any time. He told his crew to finish the job fast and make sure nothing got messed up. Karen sat in his room late at night just chilling with his sword, making sure the blade was sharp. Sir Xerus showed up right then and cut him off, wondering if he was about to start some drama again. Karen brought up that he'd heard Commissioner Gale had straight up banned him from heading out. Then he looked at Xerus, kind of checking if Xerus was also going to try and hold him back. Xerus let everyone know he was just there to pass along a message from Grand Duke Hallett, the head of the family. Xerus gave the order straight up to Karen Listine, the youngest grandson in the Listine family. As soon as Karen got that order, he knew he had to track down whoever did it and settle things for the people who died. He wrapped things up by telling Karen to make sure everyone saw exactly what Blue Sea Castle's rules were all about. Karen heard the order and her smile turned straight up evil. He did what the family had said, not even hesitating. Xerus looked around and realized this night was definitely going to drag on. Karen and Leo slipped through the streets on the east side of Taba, both trying to keep a low profile. Leo wasn't happy about pretending to be a servant, and he couldn't help but complain under his breath as they moved. He headed over to a spot where shady stuff went down all the time. Karen pointed out that if two young nobles walked around here alone, people would definitely start asking questions. Leo got why it made sense, but he still couldn't help complaining about always being stuck as the servant. Karen cut Leo off, letting him know they were almost at the spot Xerus talked about. Leo felt uneasy as he checked out the place. It definitely didn't look like somewhere rich kids would hang out. Karen just teased him for being scared and even told him he could dip if he wanted. Out of nowhere, someone showed up and asked what they were doing there. Karen walked up first and introduced himself, letting the guy know Sir Zira sent him. The man seemed pretty hyped to see them and said he was ready to help out the young masters. The guy finally took off his mask and said his name was Julio. After that, he told them there was a safe house ready and they should head there. Quote, Julio let everyone know the safe house had all kinds of gear to block anyone from listening in so they could talk without worrying about being overheard. Karen lived in Taba. They wanted to know how he ended up working as an informant for the Lestane family. Julio said it all started because Sir Zirus helped him out big time when he was a kid, so now he was just paying it back. Karen didn't waste any time and let them know right away. Someone was out there planning to hit the Lestane family. They had found out about their trip to the capital and were trying to sneak in explosives to pull it off. Karen wanted to know if Julio had any clue who did it. Julio said he did. He told her that, from what he'd found out, there were just two groups in the black market handling explosives. There were two groups in play, the Kerr group and the Caligo group, but he pointed out that the Kerr group was actually starting to dip out of the black market. Karen wanted to know what the Caligo group was all about. Julio explained that the crew was made up of guys who used to be slaves, and now they'd do any kind of work as long as there was money in it. Julio dropped some important news. He'd just found out that a few people from the Caligo group dipped out of the city earlier that day. Karen didn't see that coming at all. Julio noticed the Caligo group dipped right when the attack happened, and honestly, that timing was way too soon. Karen started looking at her choices. There was the Kerr group, who were on their way out of the black market, and then there was the Caligo group, a crew made up of ex-slaves who would pretty much take any job that paid well. Leo realized they didn't have enough time to check out both groups, so he wanted to know where they were heading next. Karen just grinned like she knew something everyone else didn't. To her, it was clear when someone's got nothing left, they just go all in, no holding back. They made up their minds to go to Caligo, and Julio promised he'd show them around the black market. While all that was going on, Mayor Glynn was having a chat with Commissioner Gale. Glynn wanted to know if Gale was actually cool with letting Karen just do his own thing. Gale explained that his son-in-law, Grand Duke Hollow, had straight up sent him a letter, basically begging for help, so Gale couldn't really say no. He pointed out that wolves handle their own problems. Then Gale shared that Karen had actually come to him earlier, asking for a favor, pretty much wanting Gale to stall him with any excuse just to keep him out of the way. Glynn saw what his grandson pulled off and couldn't help but be impressed, but he still had his doubts since Karen was just 13. Gale, on the other hand, didn't think that mattered. Karen had already shown he could handle it, and when someone's got serious talent, age doesn't really hold them back. Glynn kept saying Tiba wasn't safe and that trouble could show up out of nowhere. He also pointed out that some trade groups over there were sliding money to politicians in the capital just to get more power for themselves. He mentioned how Duke Hollow decided to stay put at the border, but back in the capital, all those big-shot noble families had their eyes glued to the Lestane family, making sure they didn't miss a thing. Tiba was packed with people who'd do whatever it took just to get on their good side. Gale broke it down, saying the Emperor stepped in because he didn't want people just looking out for themselves running the Empire. That's why he got involved with Tiba's stuff. Gale just let it slip. Sir Mason was actually in Taba. Glynn just froze, thinking if Mason was talking about that unbreakable shield, the one only an 8-star like him could pull off. Karen and his crew finally pulled up to the entrance of the Caligo Black Market. Julio let them know this was the only way in and said that if things went south, the door could get locked from the inside. Corin thought that was pretty hardcore. Just as they were about to head down, some guards showed up already holding Julio tied up. One of the guards told Julio they weren't letting anyone in today because the boss said so, and asked them nicely to leave. Julio tried to get more info, but the guard just said he didn't know, and asked again for them to go. When they kept pressing, the guard whipped out his sword, pretty much daring them to keep pushing. Julio Leo tied up all unjust.
Lately, I've had a strong addiction to watching manhwa and manga recap videos. Every single day, I find myself binging one after another, losing hours and days doing absolutely nothing productive. And honestly, it's getting out of hand. So, maybe we can make these viral videos too. I mean, look at the views, the growth, the community these creators are building. It looks simple, right? But that's a trap. You go down this endless rabbit hole, spending money, losing sleep, hiring editors and writers from Fiverr and Upwork, and still feel like you've been robbed. Because don't forget how emotional the YouTube algorithm can be with making videos go viral. It's unpredictable, especially when the market's saturated, competition's relentless, and somehow other creators are dropping 10-hour videos daily while you're stuck trying to finish one. That's when I realized something had to change. So, I built the solution, the Webtoon Narrative Suite, a complete one-click system that handles everything from cropping, script narration, text-to-speech, image processing, and full video generation in one smooth process. Save money, reduce hours of work, and have a tool that only gives you straight results. Click on the link down below and experience it for yourself. And if you want even more tools to supercharge your YouTube recap journey, visit my Ko-Fi and Patreon pages where I drop weekly new tools designed to keep you ahead as AI continues to steal our jobs. So tap in now before you get left behind.